Hi, today I am excited to introduce you to a powerful features in Salesforce development known as Apex Triggers. Apex Triggers are the fundamental part of customizing and automating your Salesforce environment. They are essentially blocks of code that enable you to respond to specific events or actions in Salesforce. With Apex triggers, you can enforce data quality, automate complex business processes, and integrate your Salesforce instance with external systems. Okay, these triggers are executed before and after the records are inserted, updated, or deleted in Salesforce. This means you can create custom logic to control and enhance your CRM data. Okay, so first question is what is trigger? As you have seen my screen, that trigger is a piece of code that is executes before and after a record is inserted, updated, and deleted from the force.com database. Got it? Trigger is a custom business logic to perform the operations on one or more records upon DML events. Trigger will get fired automatically based on the DML operations performed on the object. Trigger can be fired before and after performing the operations. By using triggers, we can perform complex validation rules and transactional flows. Triggers are asynchronous operations. By using triggers, we can perform all the calculations on either one or more object records. Trigger will get fired based on the events before insert, before update, before delete, after delete, and after undelete events. What are the ways to create triggers? Salesforce provides three ways to create a trigger, that is using standard navigation, is using developer console, and using Eclipse IDE. So first one we will discuss about using standard navigation. So go to setup object, go to build menu. In the left panel, as you have seen that in Salesforce, click on develop and expand it. Click on the Apex trigger link. Click on new button to create a new trigger and write the trigger code in the editor. Okay, using developer console, click on setup object. As you have seen the some such options like edit page, edit object, and developer console. Click on the developer console. A console will be open. Click on new menu item. Click on Apex triggers and enter the trigger name, which in the text box provided by the dialog box, select the object name on which we need to create a trigger from the pick list. Click on create button and write the business logic in the trigger and save the code by using control S. Okay, third one is by using Eclipse IDE. How to deactivate a trigger? We can also deactivate a trigger when it is no longer needed. Simply go to setup object, go to build menu options, click on develop, expand it, and click on the Apex trigger link. Please select a trigger to deactivate, clear, unselect the checkbox to active, and click on save button. Okay, delete the trigger. How can we delete the trigger? We can also delete the trigger when it's no longer needed as below. Simply just follow the question number third steps, and you have seen an option that delete a trigger, delete option operations. You can simply just click on delete operations. Your trigger will be deleted. Okay, what are the different triggers in Salesforce? There are two types of triggers in Salesforce, like before triggers and after triggers. What are before triggers? Before triggers are fired before the data is saved into the database, and after triggers are fired after the data is saved into the database. As you have seen as in the diagram, that triggers is divided into two parts, that is before trigger and after trigger. Before triggers, it will perform some events like before insert, after update, and before insert, before update, and before delete. And after trigger will perform some operations like after update, after delete, and after insert, and after undelete operations. Okay, before insert, we can execute the complex business logic and complex validation rule before inserting the record into the object, which can be fired based on the before insert of event. Example, validation rules. After insert, by using this event, we can fire the actions which contains the business logics to be performed after inserting a new record. sending email notification. Before update, by using this event, we can invoke the actions which perform certain operations before updating the record. Example validations. After update, by using this event, we can invoke the action which perform the operations after updating the records. Example, replicate the record value, sending email notifications, etc. Before triggers, by using this event, we can fire the action which perform the operation by removing the object. Okay, access verifications, removing all child records. These are the examples of before delete. Okay, after delete, by using this event, we can fire the actions which perform the operation after deleting the records from the object, like sending notification, updating roll-up summary, values, etc. After delete, by using this event, we can fire the actions to be performed after restoring the records back to the object, sending notification, updating roll-up summaries, etc. Here is the syntax of trigger, like trigger name or object name, event list, which event to be performed, like before insert, before update, before delete, and after insert, after update, and after delete operation, and after undelete operation. Before insert, before update, in the scene we have seen that where it is, just a second. Yeah, before insert, after insert, before update, after update, before delete, and after delete, and after undelete. Okay, so yeah, we can have one or more triggers per an object. As a best practice, it is always recommended to have only one trigger per an object, because we don't have the options in Salesforce to control the execution order of triggers. As we can write two triggers on the same object, but it is not the best practice, because suppose in Salesforce we can't control the execution order of triggers. Okay, but suppose, like, let's say an example, trigger 1 you have to create an, and trigger 2, we do not have the order or control the order of execution which trigger should be performed first, like trigger 2 will perform first, yeah, trigger 1 will be performed first, as we have not decided that. Okay, what is trigger? So as a best practice, we only use one trigger per an object. Okay, what are trigger context variable? Trigger context variable, by using trigger context variable, we can get the current state of the triggers. To capture the information, we use trigger context variables, like trigger dot is insert returns true if the trigger was fired due to insert operations. Trigger dot is update returns true if the trigger was fired due to update operations. Trigger dot is delete returns true if the trigger was fired due to delete operations. Trigger dot is before returns true if the trigger was fired before record is saved. Trigger dot is after returns true if the trigger was fired after record is saved. Trigger dot new returns a list of new versions of S object records. Trigger dot old returns a list of old version of S object records. Trigger dot new map returns a map of new versions of S object records, and trigger dot old map returns a map of old version of S object records. Trigger dot size returns a integer total number of records invoked due to trigger invocation for both old and new. Trigger dot is executing returns true if the current Apex code is a trigger. Can we call the callouts from trigger? Yes, we can. It is same as the usual calls class method calling from trigger. The only difference being the method should be always asynchronous with @future. What is a recursive trigger? Recursive triggers occurs if your trigger has the same DML statement and the same DML conditions in trigger firing condition on the same object, which trigger has to be written, then recursive trigger will be occurred. Okay, what is the bulky file trigger? By default, every trigger is a bulk trigger which is used to process a multiple record at a time as a batch. For each batch of 200 records, trigger will execute only a batch of records that is 200. Suppose you have 1000 records and you have to perform a trigger to update a record. It will contain 5 batch records, that will each batch contain 200. Okay, what is the use of future method in triggers? Using at the rate future annotation, we can convert the trigger into asynchronous class, and we can use a callout method. How do we avoid recursive triggers? Using a static variable in an Apex class to avoid an infinite loop. Static variables are local to the context of a web request. How many triggers we can define an object? We can define more than one trigger, but it's not a bad practice, because we should keep in mind that while writing a trigger, we should only perform one trigger on one object. Okay, can we call the patch apex from a trigger? A patch apex can be called from a class as well as from trigger code. In your trigger code, something like below, like patch class is the name of your patch class, and patch class ph is equal to new patch class, that is instance of a variable database that execute patch page. Okay, what is the order of execution of trigger? Order of execution of trigger: first you have to fetch the data into database, then it will goes for system validation, perform some system validations, then it will goes for before triggers, then it will goes for custom validations, then it will goes for save the record to the as object, then after triggers will be performed, then assignment rules, then auto response flow, then workflow rules, any field update, there again fire before trigger and after trigger, then escalation rules, then roll up summary, then the criteria based summary, then commit record, then email actions. What are the errors you faced in triggers? That system.limit exception SQL query 101. Okay, system.not null pointer exception, attempt to dereference null object, recursive trigger, and missing the required field. Few more best practices for trigger. There should be only one trigger for each object. Avoid complex logic in triggers to simplify testing, and reuse triggers should delegate to Apex class which contain the actual execution logic. Bulkify any helper class or methods. Triggers should be bulkified, should be able to process up to 200 records for each call. Execute DML statement using collections instead of individual records per DML statement. Using collections in SQL where clauses to retrieve all records back in single query. Use a consistent naming convention including the object link example account trigger. Best practices for Visualforce page: accessing components ID, page block elements, controllers and controller extensions, improving Visualforce performance. Static resources, second, rendering PDF, third, using component facets, fifth, view state error which can avoid transient key, word, action, reason, and JavaScript. Okay, order of execution of Visualforce page: first it is invoking the controller, then it is invoking the constructor, then invoking the methods, then invoking the getter and setter methods. What can cause data loss in Salesforce? There are many things which can contribute to the data loss in Salesforce, which include migrating to number, percent, and money from other data types. Then our data should be lost. When you change the date and time, migrating to multi-select pick list from any other type but except pick list. Okay, moving from checkbox auto number multi-select pick list to any other types. Changing changing text area to phone, URL, email, or text. So that's all about Apex triggers, scenario based question and interview questions which were asked in summer.